Here's something many people don't realize. You don't need an Investec private bank account to save with Investec. Their personal cash investments are available from 100,000 Rand and designed for capital preservation. In markets like these, having a low-risk cash component alongside equities is simply sensible, particularly if you're over 55.
They are violating the international humanitarian law, the Charter of the UN, the rules of the foreign trade. So we have 96,000 people that are waiting for a surgery because we don't have electricity or oil to have electricity in the hospital.
That's the Cuban ambassador to the United Nations, Ernesto Soberón Guzmán. Well, you're tuned in to Daybreak. I'm Alec Hogg. It's Monday, March the 23rd. We're cutting through the noise this morning, as we always do, to bring you exactly what you need to know to start your week. We kick off with our partners in New York with the biggest overnight news. That's from our partners at Bloomberg News Now. But before we get there, man, is it confusing. The Rand, 17 Rand and 12 cents against the US dollar. The gold price is at $4,358 an ounce. That is a smack of note, down another 5% overnight. And then Bitcoin isn't showing any relief either. That's at 68,185. What is happening to investment markets? Well, on Friday, we saw a knock of 2% on NASDAQ, 1.5% to the S&P 500 index. Who knows? But maybe our partners at Bloomberg have got some insight that we can use.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran are aimed at destroying its fortifications along the Strait of Hormuz, while Iranian leaders will be facing a Monday deadline from President Trump to reopen the waterway. He made the comment on NBC's Meet the Press.
There has been a campaign to using military assets to soften up the Iranian fortifications along the strait. That's going to continue until they are completely demolished.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on NBC's Meet the Press. Saturday, President Trump issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face strikes on its power plants, a deadline that expires Monday evening in New York. Eurasia Group President and founder Ian Bremmer says President Trump's actions during the war with Iran have been incoherent, and at this point, there's no easy off-ramp to the conflict.
I think that the United States is hitting Iran incredibly hard with its military capabilities. But the vulnerability is on the economic side. And on that side, the absolute short-term priority for Trump is get the price down, get more oil out under any circumstances possible. And clearly, he believes that there is some marginal benefit to price that comes from getting more of that oil out, and not necessarily in the hands of the Chinese, but instead to countries that the Americans are more nominally aligned with.
Eurasia Group's Ian Bremmer. Iran's strikes on Israel appear to be intensifying as the conflict in the Middle East enters its fourth week, leaving dozens of people injured and causing damage and disruption across the country. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is calling on other countries to take a stand against Iran.
What more proof do you need that this regime that threatens the entire world has to be stopped? Israel and the United States are working together for the entire world. And it's time to see the leaders of the rest of the countries join up.
Oil will be very much in focus as we begin the new trading week amid the war in the Middle East. Omar Aguilar is Chief Investment Officer at Charles Schwab Investment Management.
So clients, started to just, be concerned about, what would be the length of these, the implications. And in many cases, they see it not just because of the results and the volatility we see on an every given day, but they also see in their regular lives, the effect on gas prices, the effects of just the potential inflation hit, something that, clients are starting to feel. And that's the natural reaction, is to just become, risk averse.
Omar Aguilar of Charles Schwab interviewed on Bloomberg Surveillance.
And that was Charlie Pellet of Bloomberg in New York. Well, that oil price is something that is now starting to hit already in South Africa. I have reports from a number of friends who've gone to various petrol stations and petrol has run out. It's not easy to fill your tank up, apparently, anymore. I'll be trying myself this morning, and it is just pure logic. The Department of Mineral Resources tells us that the under-recovery at the moment at the fuel pump is R8.80 on petrol and R15.10 on diesel. What that means is that if you were to go into the global market, buy at the current price of oil and the current rand, you would be paying R8.80 more per litre of petrol and R15.10 more per litre of diesel. So not surprisingly, people are being logical. They realize that buy now while it's cheap and are filling up their tanks. Heaven knows how many jerry cans are being filled up as well. And you've got to understand that from the position of the garage owners or the people who own the petrol stations, they would presumably be trying to stockpile until the price gets increased, which it is. It's a guaranteed increase. It's coming up early next month. Now, the problem with the increases in South Africa and the way that you have with an administered petrol price, as we do have here, is they levy the average for the month. So although we're sitting at R8.80 and under recovery now and R15.10 on diesel, it's going to increase not by that much next month, but it'll increase by a significant amount again in the following month. So we are manufacturing a artificial crisis in South Africa where the motorists, just sensible citizens, are saying, hang on a minute, why shouldn't I stock up while I can? And of course, somebody has to pay the price. I'm not sure who it is, and we will be finding out from experts as we go forward. Well, let's get into some of the big stories of the day. And we're going back now to the BizNews conference. Piet le Roux is the chief executive of Sakeliga, and he had some pretty hectic things to say about transformation and how transformation is hurting South Africa. So on the one hand, you've got these administered prices that are manufacturing a major crisis. Believe me, it's coming. And on the other hand, we've got something else that Pretoria has been busy with, the whole transformation agenda that everybody believes in, but the unintended consequences are really scary. Here's Piet le Roux.
Transformation, ladies and gentlemen, is fundamentally totalitarian. Under this totalitarian framework, capital is devoured, evident in decayed infrastructure, from rail to ports to public utilities, to collapsed towns and even cities. Economic progress is throttled, evident in chronically stagnant GDP and relentlessly expanding joblessness. Productive people and financial capital are driven from these shores, evident in the million or two, mostly Westerners, that left the country, and also the JSE's structural contraction, with listings today at a historic low of just over 200 from its high of around 750. Discussing the transformationist program and its catastrophic effects today, fortunately, is much easier than it was even just 5 or 10 years ago. Until fairly recently, the ideology of transformationism was surrounded by a high-voltage electric fence of political correctness. But its harmful effects, its harmful results, have become too obvious to deny. Its architects too forthright in their extremism, and its targeting primarily of the Western subsection of the population too brazen for good people to remain silent and inactive. It is no longer so clear that these policies have noble motives. For nobility of motive would long ago have led to a change of course. The essential principle of transformationism is displacement. White people, and to a lesser but still significant degree other minority groups, are targeted for displacement. White shareholders are to be displaced from ownership, employees from jobs, children from schools and sports teams, farmers from land. The state is not too fussed about where the displaced go. If they leave the country, so be it. The constant waves of skilled immigration have never been seriously lamented by ANC-dominated governments. If they move to build new businesses, these businesses simply become new targets for further rounds of displacement.
It's what you call uber truths that Piet le Roux has been expressing. That full interview is available on BizNews TV and on BizNews Radio. Well, there's something else that's going on at the same time. It's almost like we're being hit from all sides at the moment here in South Africa, and that's the Madlanga Commission and the ad hoc investigation that was sparked by the allegations made by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Nkwanasi, the head of the South African Police Services in KwaZulu-Natal. My colleague Chris Steyn has been on top of all of this, and yesterday in the Sunday show, she spoke with Jonathan Deal.
Jonathan, do you think that all the revelations and allegations at these public hearings have put the brakes on attempts by organized crime to capture politicians and top police officials?
Chris, I don't think so. I think that they might be a little bit more cautious. But it is, after all, if one is in the criminal syndicates in South Africa, it is the only thing that you do. It's your source of income. And the vested interests there are enormous. And we have seen this with the assassination of whistleblowers. So if life is cheap in South Africa, and I've spoken about this on other interviews as well, people die in this country for a nice pair of tackies or a cell phone. If life is cheap in the general population of South Africa, the people that have these vested interests of billions of rands will stop at nothing to assassinate people. And I don't think that this will necessarily arrest it. And if I had to say, how will South Africa ever escape from under this issue, it will be when the government starts working with the public and providing an institution that the public can trust. So there's institutional trust in SAPS, but also that the government understands that they will never, ever win the war against crime at any level, including the level that you've referred to in your question, without the willing cooperation of the public.
So are you saying that this is not going to prevent South Africa from becoming a mafia state?
I think South Africa is already, to a large extent, a mafia state. If you've got criminals calling the shots at the highest levels of the institution that is expected to protect South Africans, I think that is a good definition of a mafia state.
Jonathan, what is expected of Parliament now?
I think that Parliament and SAPS have got a joint responsibility. The biggest thing that Parliament could do would be to remove the South African police services or remove the politics from South African police services. South African police services have, for decades, and by previous governments, been used as a political football. Because who controls the police generally, to an extent, controls the populace. But what has happened is that we have seen a rise in criminal activity at all levels with the devolution of the South African police services over the last 10 to 15 years. It has just been a downward trajectory.
Good news from Southern Africa. BizNews partner DCC Hotel Group showcases world-class hospitality across the region. We spotlight more than 100 carefully selected lodges supporting tourism, local communities and conservation. Here in Hermanus, whale watching and coastal charm await. Your home for the BizNews Conference 2026.
That's Jonathan Deal talking with my colleague Chris Steyn on the Sunday show this week. Again, you can pick up that full interview on the other channels and on this channel as well. So anywhere you access your BizNews information, you just join the dots, and there's a very disturbing picture that is starting to emerge. And we will actually be referring to the most controversial of the presentations at BNC 8, which was from Nick Hudson. Nick Hudson, the chairman of Panda and the man who was so outspoken in his resistance to COVID-19 narratives that were provided to the rest of us. And you've got it, when you go to second level thinking, you've got to start wondering, well, maybe these guys that are written off as conspiracy theorists have actually got a point, because the facts are telling us that things are not really going well, not just here, but anywhere in the world right now, it seems. Well, not anywhere, but most parts of the world. And let's get back to that story that we began with the pull quote. Can you imagine you are sitting in Cuba right now? Now, Cuba has been blockaded by the United States. So there's no oil going in there. The last oil that went in was in January. And the result of this has been pretty horrific. So what do you do if you're Cuban? The Cuban ambassador to the United Nations, Ernesto Soberón Guzmán, had a fascinating interview with our partners at Bloomberg. And let's pick up some of the highlights.
I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good honor. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it.
What is your reaction to some of the rhetoric that we've heard from the President of the United States?
Well, during the last 3 months, almost every day, President Trump or Secretary of State Marco Rubio said something like this: friendly takeover, we are negotiating, we are not negotiating, we are ready to bomb and destroy everything. And for us, we have been our position is clear crystal. Our president announced last Friday that we are recently starting a dialogue between officials of the Cuban government and officials of the U.S. government based on equal footing, respect of sovereignty, respect of independence, and respect of not interference in internal affairs.
Let's talk a bit about the oil blockade that's been in place. The last shipment that you got of oil was in January. That came from Mexico. Before that, in December, you got a shipment from Venezuela. Of course, circumstances have changed. You used to rely on 25,000 barrels a day from Venezuela. That's gone. What has the impact of that, the oil blockade imposed by the United States, been on the country of Cuba over these last couple of months?
It has a huge impact. The first question here is, the government of the U.S. has the right to impose a blockade like this? Do they have the right to set third countries that they can sell or not oil to Cuba? I think that they have not this right, and this is not. They are violating the international law, the international humanitarian law, the Charter of the UN, the rules of the foreign trade. So we have 96,000 people that are waiting for a surgery because we don't have electricity or oil to have electricity in the hospital. Around 11,000 of them children. We have more than 30,000 women, pregnant women, waiting for an ultrasound because also lack of electricity. But you need electricity to produce food. You need electricity to pump water. You need electricity for food transportation, to transport people. You need electricity for almost everything.
Are you disappointed China isn't doing more? They're sending solar equipment, for instance, but do you wish that they would take a stronger stand?
Not at all. We have been receiving political support for the majority of the country, but at the same time, we have receiving some other support from many countries. You mentioned China, Vietnam, Mexico, Russia, Brazil, Chile, the Caribbean countries. The UN system is also working now to try to implement this. When a country offers some kind of aid, they are trying to be like a bridge.
What is your message to the American people at this moment? As we hear, again, the president making bellicose statements from the White House, what would you say to American people who are watching this and hearing from the administration that things are bound to change in Cuba in the near term?
Well, yesterday I read a poll that said that only 28% of the American people support this kind of policy of their government towards Cuba. So I will say to the rest, the 72% that doesn't support this policy, that please continues pushing, continues raising your voice in favor of a different kind of relation between Cuba and the U.S.
That's a Cuban ambassador to the United Nations, Ernesto Soberón Guzmán. Well, there's so much in there that is relevant and parallel here to South Africa. But just imagine for a minute that Donald Trump decided that he would blockade South Africa. And who would come to support us? Who would come to our aid? In the same way as Cuba has got friends in China and Russia and South Africa. But what can we do to support them, or what can be done to support them, or what is being done to support them? So at the moment, you've got this extraordinary situation in the world where there's a guy in the White House who's using his muscle and nobody's standing up to him. So it is it possible for them to stand up to him? Well, probably not. And so what do you do in that circumstance if you are South Africa? You're a little country, which is 1/77th the size of the GDP of the US, less than 0.5% of the global population, 0.3% of global GDP. Surely you put South Africa first and you just do what's right for our country, because we've got high unemployment. We've got lots of things that we need to worry about here. That has to be on the minds today of people in Pretoria. Mentioned at the intro that we're sitting in a situation in South Africa where we have a petrol price that is currently being massively subsidized, but it's not going to last because the adjustment comes early next month, R8.80 according to Department of Mineral Energy. And that is just to confirm or reaffirm. And heaven help you if you're driving a diesel vehicle where the under recovery right now is 15 Rand and 10 cents. All of this gets any logical, rational person thinking, what the heck is happening? And so we're seeking answers, we're seeking insights. And at the BizNews conference, Nick Hudson made a stir. I would say probably 70% of the people in the audience thought, no, come on, this guy's lost it. He's completely off his rocker. But there were some who felt that he was actually telling the real truth, another uber truth, like we heard earlier from Piet le Roux. But I've pulled a quote for you from Nick's presentation, which is quite interesting because it relates to energy. And suspend your disbelief for a while, listen to it. I did ask him, incidentally, before he made the presentation to please run it through AI. Make sure that AI was comfortable, that he wasn't just making up a whole lot of stuff. And he assured me that he did exactly that. But let's have a listen to Nick Hudson.
To illustrate how pervasively the Anglo-American establishment supervenes over South Africa, I wanted to quickly take a look at just one sector, energy. On top of it all, we had Sir Evelyn de Rothschild, governor of the London School of Economics for 42 years, driving the translation of climate science into economic imperative. And with Edmund de Rothschild Asset Management making a 26 billion euro commitment to net zero alignment, as they call it, bringing the muscle into that initiative. And here's how it gets local. Listen to this. In the restructuring of Eskom's mountain of debt, Rothschild Co advised the creditors, while Lazard Limited, an historically Rothschild allied and principal bank of the Anglo-American establishment, advises Eskom itself. How convenient. This restructuring was a precondition for accessing funding for South Africa's so-called just energy transition, the single largest climate finance deal directed at any developing country in the world. Martin Kingston mentioned several times this conference. The executive chairman of Rothschild Co. also chairs B4SA, which is the implementation arm of BUSA, Business Unity South Africa, which handles relationships with the government, as well as the Resource Mobilization Fund, which deploys its own staffers in fields like energy modeling, tariff design, legal communications, and energy policy experts into the president's NECOM apparatus. So Rothschild Co are simultaneously advising National Treasury, which decides whether Eskom will assume debt or who will assume Eskom's debt, advising on Eskom's restructuring, which determines the structure of the energy market, advising on Transnet, which transports the coal or would do so, representing creditors in Eskom's debt reorganization, which determines the terms of the unbundling. In short, NUMS is entirely right when they say that the Rothschilds have almost complete control over the process that is forcing South Africa down the catastrophically expensive lark of renewable energy under the banner of the climate crisis scam. We're talking about a level of state capture here that is enough to make even a Gupta blush. And these guys are laughing all the way to the bank at our considerable expense. Because all of this will ensure that instead of utilizing abundant and cheap coal to secure the energy independence that South Africa enjoyed during the apartheid era, South Africa will instead emerge over-indebted, energy-starved, even more dependent on the Anglo-American establishment, and with a national government that is, in all matters of importance, manipulated by foreign interests.
Pretty strong words indeed, but you've got to stop and think for a minute. Hang on. We've got these fantastic gas resources off the coast. Why are they not being exploited? We've got hundreds of years of coal. Why are we closing our coal-fired power stations? Well, it's starting to reverse now, but why were we? And when those kind of irrational, illogical decisions, economic decisions are made in Pretoria, then questions must be asked. And questions may come to the kind of conclusions that we heard today from Nick Hudson, or rather that we heard at the BizNews conference from Nick Hudson, and indeed the clip that you've just been with. Well, that wraps up this morning's edition of Daybreak. Quite a lot of dot joining for you, hasn't there? I'm Alec Hogg. Thank you for starting your Monday with us. Have a fantastic day ahead. We'll be right back here tomorrow morning. Cheerio. When it comes to savings, we spend a lot of time discussing returns and interest rates, but not enough time asking why we're saving in the first place. That's the thinking behind Investec's #What'sYourWhy campaign that's been running. If your goal is stability or peace of mind, their personal cash investment is accessible from 100,000 Rand, and you don't need to bank with them. Whatever your reason for saving, Investec understands that.